I was standing in my driveway at 5:30 in the morning, watching my breath form clouds in the frigid February air, when I heard the sharp tap of heels on frozen pavement behind me. The snowfall had stopped an hour ago, leaving behind 6 inches of pristine white powder that blanketed our townhouse community in Naperville, Illinois. I had just finished clearing my section of the shared walkway that connected all 12 units in our row, something I had been doing every winter morning for the past 3 years without complaint or issue. But apparently, that was all about to change. "Vincent Quinlan, what exactly do you think you are doing?" The voice belonged to Patricia Henderson, the newly appointed president of the Meadowbrook Townhomes Homeowners Association. She had moved into Unit 7 about 8 months ago and had immediately positioned herself to take over the HOA leadership when old Mr. Carmichael retired last October. Patricia was everything you would imagine in a stereotypical HOA president. Mid-40s, blonde hair cut in that distinctive speak to the manager style, perpetually dressed in athleisure wear despite never appearing to actually exercise, and possessing an almost supernatural ability to find problems where none existed. I leaned on my snow shovel and turned to face her. "Good morning, Patricia. I am clearing the walkway. Same thing I do every time it snows." She marched toward me, her white sneakers crunching through the snow I had not yet reached. Her face was already flushed with indignation, and the sun had not even risen yet. "That is precisely the problem, Vincent. You are in direct violation of HOA bylaw section 12, subsection 4, paragraph 3. I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "I am sorry, what?" Patricia pulled out her phone. The screen brightness turned up so high it practically blinded me in the pre-dawn darkness. She scrolled through what appeared to be a PDF document, her manicured nail tapping aggressively against the glass. "Right here. Snow removal from common areas must be performed by the designated HOA-approved contractor only. Individual homeowners are prohibited from performing snow removal on shared walkways to ensure uniformity and prevent liability issues." "Patricia, I have been clearing this walkway every winter since I moved in. Nobody has ever said anything about it." "Well, I am saying something about it now." She looked up from her phone, her expression triumphant. "The bylaw has always been there. Previous leadership simply failed to enforce it properly. I am rectifying that oversight. Consider this your official warning. If I catch you clearing the shared walkway again, you will receive a fine of $250. I could feel my jaw tightening. "So you are saying I should just leave the snow there? What about the elderly couple in Unit 3? Mrs. Patterson uses a walker. She cannot navigate through 6 inches of snow. The HOA contractor will handle it." Patricia crossed her arms over her puffy vest. "They are scheduled to arrive by 9 o'clock this morning." 9 o'clock? Patricia, people need to get to work. I start my shift at the hospital at 7. My neighbors have jobs too. Then they can leave earlier and walk more carefully. She turned on her heel, then paused and looked back at me. "And Vincent, I will be watching. Any further violations will result in immediate fines. Have a wonderful day." She walked back toward her unit, leaving footprints in the snow I had been about to clear. I stood there for a long moment, my gloved hands gripping the shovel handle, trying to process what had just happened. The rational part of my brain told me to let it go, to just follow the rules no matter how absurd they seemed. But the part of me that had spent the last 3 years helping my neighbors, the part that took pride in making sure everyone could safely navigate to their cars on winter mornings, that part was furious. I looked down at the section I had already cleared, then at the remaining 100 feet of walkway that still lay buried. With a heavy sigh, I turned and carried my shovel back to my garage. If Patricia wanted to enforce obscure bylaws, fine. I would follow them to the letter. The consequences of that decision became apparent within the hour. I was finishing my coffee when I heard the first fall. A muffled thump followed by a sharp cry of pain. I rushed to my window and saw Derek Morrison from Unit 9 sprawled on the snow-covered walkway, his briefcase lying several feet away where it had slid after hitting the ground. He slowly pushed himself up, testing his ankle, his face contorted in discomfort. I grabbed my coat and hurried outside. "Derek, are you okay?" I called out as I approached, carefully navigating the uncleared path. He looked up at me, wincing. "I think so, just twisted my ankle. Why is the walkway not cleared? You always have it done by now." I helped him to his feet, letting him lean on my shoulder as he tested his weight on the injured ankle. New HOA rule. Apparently, I am not allowed to clear the shared walkway anymore. Only the approved contractor can do it, and they will not be here until 9. You are kidding me. Derek shook his head in disbelief. That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. Take it up with Patricia. I helped him back to his unit, making sure he could make it inside safely. His ankle was already starting to swell. By 8:30, I had witnessed 2 more near falls and received angry texts from 4 different neighbors asking why the walkway was not cleared. I responded to each one with the same explanation, including a screenshot of the bylaw Patricia had cited. The response was universally outraged, but I knew Patricia had the bylaws on her side, no matter how senseless the enforcement seemed. I left for work at 6:45, taking extra time to navigate the treacherous walkway. The hospital was only a 15-minute drive, but the roads were still slick from the overnight snow. I worked as a registered nurse in the emergency department at Edward Hospital, and winter storms always meant a busy shift. Sure enough, we had 3 slip and fall injuries before noon, all from people who had encountered uncleared walkways and icy patches. When I returned home that evening, the walkway had finally been cleared, but the job was mediocre at best. Large patches of compacted snow remained, already turning to ice as the temperature dropped. The contractor had clearly rushed through the work, probably managing multiple properties throughout the day. It was nowhere near as thorough as the clearing I had done that morning on my own section. The next snowfall came 4 days later. This time, I did not even bother getting my shovel out. I watched from my window as the snow accumulated, as neighbors struggled through it, as the contractor failed to show up until almost 11 o'clock. The pattern repeated itself over the next 3 weeks. Snow would fall. I would leave it alone despite every instinct telling me to clear it. People would struggle and slip, and eventually, the contractor would show up hours late and do a half-hearted job. Patricia seemed thrilled with her enforcement of the rules. I saw her taking photos of the uncleared walkway one morning, presumably documenting that I was no longer violating the bylaws. She even sent out a community email praising the professional snow removal service and reminding everyone that individual snow clearing of common areas was strictly prohibited. The situation reached its breaking point on a Tuesday morning in early March. We had gotten hit with an unexpected late-season storm, one of those heavy, wet snowfalls that creates perfect conditions for ice. The snow had started Monday evening and continued through the night, leaving about 8 inches on the ground. I woke up at my usual time, looked out at the buried walkway, and felt that familiar urge to grab my shovel. But I suppressed it. Patricia had made the rules clear, and I was going to follow them. I was getting ready for work when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Janet Ashford from Unit 5 standing there, her eyes red from crying. Janet was in her early 30s, a single mother with a 6-year-old daughter named Emma. "Vincent, "I do not know what to do," she said, her voice shaking. "I need to get Emma to school and myself to work, but I cannot carry her through all that snow. She has asthma, and the cold triggers it. I cannot risk her falling or breathing too hard in the freezing air. Can you please clear just a path? I know about the stupid rule, but this is an emergency." I felt my resolve crumbling. "Janet, I want to help, I really do, but Patricia has been absolutely militant about this. She threatened me with a $250 fine." "I will pay it," Janet said desperately. "I will pay the fine if she gives you one. Please, Vincent, I am begging you." I looked past her at the snow-covered walkway, then back at her desperate face. "Okay, give me 5 minutes. Get Emma ready." I grabbed my shovel and went to work, clearing a path from Janet's door to the parking lot. It took me 20 minutes, and I was sweating despite the cold by the time I finished. Janet thanked me profusely, tears streaming down her face as she carefully walked Emma to their car. I watched them drive away, then returned my shovel to the garage, knowing full well that Patricia had probably seen everything from her window. I was proven right within the hour. An email hit my inbox at 7:15, CCing all the other homeowners in our community. The subject line read, "Violation Notice Vincent Quinlan Unit 2. The email was exactly what I expected. Patricia had documented my flagrant violation of HOA bylaws with time-stamped photos showing me clearing the walkway. She outlined the $250 fine and warned all other residents that similar violations would be met with equal or greater penalties. She also included a lengthy paragraph about how my actions undermined the authority of the HOA and created an unsafe precedent where untrained individuals perform snow removal, potentially increasing liability exposure." I deleted the email and went to work. The fine annoyed me, but helping Janet and Emma had been worth it. What I did not expect was the chain reaction my actions would trigger. By that evening, I had received messages from 8 other homeowners expressing their support and outrage at Patricia's enforcement of the bylaw. Several of them forwarded me their own email exchanges with Patricia, where they had questioned the policy and been met with condescending responses about proper procedures and professional standards. The community was clearly fed up, but nobody seemed to know what to do about it. The situation escalated 2 days later. The snow from Tuesday had partially melted during a brief warm spell, then refrozen overnight, creating a treacherous sheet of ice along the entire walkway. The contractor had not returned since Tuesday morning, leaving the compacted snow to transform into a skating rink. I had gotten up early Thursday morning specifically to be extra careful on my way to work, taking small, shuffling steps and using my car for balance as I navigated to the parking lot. I was just pulling out of my parking space when I saw Patricia emerge from her unit. She was wearing her typical outfit, black leggings, an oversized hoodie, and those same white sneakers. She was looking down at her phone as she walked, not paying attention to the icy conditions. I should have driven away. Every rational bone in my body told me to just leave and let whatever happened happen, but I could not do it. I rolled down my window. "Patricia, be careful. The walkway is solid ice." She looked up at me with immediate annoyance. "I am perfectly capable of walking, Vincent. Perhaps you should worry about your own violations instead of telling me what to do. I am just trying to warn you. It is really slick. I heard you the first time." She turned her attention back to her phone and took another step. I saw it happen in slow motion. Her white sneaker came down on a particularly smooth patch of ice. Her foot shot forward, her arms windmilled frantically, and her phone went flying through the air. She landed hard on her back, her head bouncing off the frozen walkway with a sickening crack. She did not get up. I threw my car in park and jumped out, running carefully across the ice toward her prone form. "Patricia! Patricia, can you hear me?" She was conscious but clearly dazed, her eyes unfocused and confused. "What happened?" she mumbled. "You fell. Do not move." "I am calling an ambulance." I already had my phone out, dialing 911. My nursing training kicked in automatically. I checked her pupils, noting they were slightly unequal, a concerning sign. "Do you know where you are?" "My head hurts," she said, trying to sit up. "No, stay still. You might have a concussion or a neck injury." I gently placed my hand on her shoulder, keeping her down. The 911 operator answered, and I quickly relayed the situation, our address, and Patricia's symptoms. They assured me an ambulance was on the way. Other neighbors had started to emerge from their units, drawn by the commotion. Derek Morrison appeared first, followed by Janet Ashford and the elderly Pattersons from Unit 3. They all stood at a safe distance, their faces etched with concern and a hint of something else I could not quite identify. Maybe it was irony, given that Patricia's fall had occurred on the very walkway she had insisted remain uncleared by residents. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. The paramedics carefully stabilized Patricia's neck and loaded her onto a stretcher. I gave them a detailed rundown of what I had witnessed and her symptoms. As they wheeled her toward the ambulance, Patricia suddenly seemed to fully grasp what had happened. "The ice," she said, her voice stronger now. "The walkway was not cleared properly. This is the contractor's fault. I am going to sue." I exchanged glances with one of the paramedics, who just shook his head slightly. They loaded Patricia into the ambulance and drove away, lights flashing but no sirens necessary. The gathered neighbors slowly dispersed, but not before several of them approached me. Derek was the first to speak. "So she fell on the ice because the walkway was not properly maintained, right?" "Looks that way," I agreed. "The same ice that was there because she would not let anyone clear the walkway properly." "That would be the situation, yes." Derek nodded slowly. "That is what I thought. Just wanted to make sure I understood correctly. Mrs. Patterson shuffled over with her walker, her husband supporting her elbow. "Vincent, dear, we need to do something about this HOA situation. Patricia has been a nightmare since she took over. This is just the final straw." "I agree, Mrs. Patterson, but I do not know what we can do." She was technically following the bylaws. "Then maybe we need to change the bylaws," Janet chimed in. "Or change the leadership. There has to be something in the HOA rules about removing a president who is not acting in the community's best interest." I had not thought about that angle. "You might be right. Let me look into it." That evening, I did exactly that. I pulled up the complete HOA bylaws and governing documents, which I had to admit I had never fully read before. Most of it was standard stuff about architectural guidelines, noise ordinances, and maintenance responsibilities. But buried in Section 23, I found something interesting. A clause about removing board members for cause. It required a petition signed by at least 60% of homeowners, followed by a special meeting and a vote. If 2/3 of attending homeowners voted in favor of removal, the board member would be immediately terminated. I drafted an email to all the residents, outlining what I had found and proposing we start a petition to remove Patricia from her position as HOA president. I explained the process, the requirements, and my reasons for believing her enforcement of the snow removal policy had been dangerous and detrimental to the community. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response was overwhelming. Within 2 hours, I had positive replies from 10 of the 12 units. Only Patricia's unit and one other unit did not respond. By the next morning, I had collected signatures from 9 households, well over the required 60% threshold. Mrs. Patterson had even gone door to door with her walker to make sure everyone had a chance to sign. I filed the petition with the HOA management company that handled our paperwork and finances. They confirmed receipt and said they would notify Patricia and schedule a special meeting within 30 days, as required by the bylaws. Patricia was released from the hospital 2 days after her fall with a diagnosis of a mild concussion and severe bruising. She was prescribed rest and pain medication and instructed to follow up with her primary care doctor. I learned this not from Patricia herself, but from Derek, who had somehow gotten the information from a mutual friend who worked at the hospital. What happened next, I did not expect. The management company called me on Monday morning, a week after Patricia's fall. The woman on the phone, a tired-sounding administrator named Michelle, delivered news that complicated everything. "Mr. Quinlan, I need to inform you that Patricia Henderson has filed a liability claim against the HOA for her injuries. She is alleging that the HOA's failure to properly maintain the common walkways resulted in her fall and subsequent injuries. She is demanding the HOA cover all her medical expenses and is threatening a lawsuit for pain and suffering if we do not comply." I sat down heavily on my couch. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Patricia, the HOA president, is suing the HOA that she runs because she fell on ice that was there, because she enforced a policy preventing residents from clearing it. "That appears to be the situation, yes," Michelle said dryly. "I have worked with HOAs for 15 years, and this is a new one even for me. What happens now? Well, the claim goes to our liability insurance carrier. They will investigate and determine if the HOA has exposure, but here is where it gets complicated. If they determine that Patricia, as HOA president, created the dangerous condition through her policy decisions, they might deny the claim entirely. They might also argue that she assumed the risk by walking on a surface she knew was not properly maintained. And what about the petition to remove her? That proceeds as scheduled. We have the special meeting set for 3 weeks from this Thursday at 7 p.m. It will be held at the community center on Maple Avenue. Patricia has been notified and has the right to attend and defend herself, though given her medical restrictions, she may choose to submit a written statement instead. I thanked Michelle and ended the call. This whole situation was spiraling into something far more complex than I had imagined. What had started as a simple dispute about snow shoveling had evolved into potential lawsuits, insurance claims, and HOA drama that would probably be talked about for years. The next development came from a source I had not anticipated: the contractor. 2 days after my call with Michelle, a man named Robert Chen showed up at my door. He was in his mid-50s, wearing a heavy work jacket with Chen Property Services embroidered on the chest. "Mr. Quinlan, I am Robert Chen. I am the contractor your HOA has been using for snow removal. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I invited him in, offering coffee which he gratefully accepted. We sat at my kitchen table and Robert pulled out a folder stuffed with papers. "I heard about Mrs. Henderson's fall," he began. "And I heard she is trying to blame the HOA for inadequate maintenance. I need to be very clear about something. The maintenance problems are directly caused by her interference with my work." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Robert opened his folder and showed me a series of emails and work orders. "When I first got the contract with your HOA back in December, I quoted pricing based on arriving within 2 hours of snowfall ending and doing thorough removal, including salting and ice treatment. Mrs. Henderson rejected that proposal, saying it was too expensive. She insisted I could only come during normal business hours, no earlier than 8 a.m., and she cut my time allotment in half to save money. She also refused to authorize ice treatment unless temperatures were below 10 degrees. He shuffled through more papers. I have been documenting everything. Every time I arrived to find the walkways already packed down from foot traffic because I was not allowed to come early. Every time I requested authorization for ice treatment and was denied. Every time I tried to explain that the reduced schedule was creating hazardous conditions. I have emails going back months where I warned her this exact scenario could happen. Why are you telling me this? Because she is already trying to throw me under the bus. Her lawyer contacted me yesterday, implying that my company's negligence caused her fall. I am not taking that hit. My business reputation is everything. If this goes to court or even to an insurance investigation, I need allies who can testify about what really happened here. I understood immediately. You want me to testify that she prevented residents from doing early snow removal, which would have prevented the dangerous conditions. Exactly. And I am not the only one collecting evidence. I have already submitted all my documentation to the HOA's insurance company. I expect they are going to have some very pointed questions for Mrs. Henderson about her decision-making. Robert left me with copies of all his documentation, which I read through thoroughly that evening. The picture they painted was damning. Patricia had not just been enforcing bylaws. She had been cutting corners on safety to save money, all while preventing residents from filling in the gaps with their own volunteer efforts. Her fall was not bad luck or contractor negligence. It was the inevitable result of her own poor decisions. The special HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, March 27th. The intervening weeks were tense and filled with drama. Patricia had sent out multiple emails to all residents, defending her actions and portraying herself as a victim of both my reckless snow shoveling and the contractor's incompetence. She claimed that the bylaws she had been enforcing were for everyone's safety and legal protection, and that removing her as president would expose the community to liability. Few people were buying it. The responses from other homeowners ranged from polite disagreement to outright hostility. One resident, a lawyer named Marcus Webb from Unit 11, even wrote a detailed rebuttal explaining how Patricia's interpretation of the bylaws was overly strict and how her cost-cutting measures with the contractor had actually increased liability rather than decreased it. The week before the meeting, I received an unexpected visit from two people: a claims adjuster from the HOA's insurance company and a representative from their legal team. They interviewed me for over 2 hours, asking detailed questions about the timeline of events, Patricia's enforcement of the bylaws, the contractor's response times, and the conditions on the day of her fall. I was honest about everything, including my own violation of the bylaws when I helped Janet clear a path. The claims adjuster, a methodical woman named Sarah Patel, seemed particularly interested in that detail. So you were fined for clearing the walkway to help a neighbor with a legitimate need. Yes, $250. Patricia sent out a community-wide email about it. You still have that email. I pulled it up on my phone and forwarded it to her. She read it carefully, her expression growing more severe with each paragraph. This is helpful, very helpful. Thank you for your time, Mr. Quinlan. They left, and I had the distinct impression that Patricia's insurance claim was not going well for her. The Thursday of the special meeting arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt, wanting to appear professional and serious. I arrived at the community center 15 minutes early and found the room already filling up. All 12 units were represented, with several units sending multiple residents. The only person not present was Patricia herself. Michelle from the management company stood at the front of the room, setting up a laptop and projector. She looked harried and exhausted, probably from dealing with 3 weeks of Patricia's demands and complaints. At 7 p.m. sharp, she called the meeting to order. "Good evening, everyone. This is a special meeting of the Meadowbrook Townhomes Homeowners Association, called pursuant to Section 23 of the governing bylaws. We are here to consider a petition for the removal of Patricia Henderson from her position as HOA president. Mrs. Henderson was invited to attend, but has chosen to submit a written statement instead, which I will read to you now." Michelle pulled up a document and began reading. Patricia's statement was long, defensive, and accusatory. She claimed that the petition against her was retaliatory because she had dared to enforce the rules that everyone agreed to when they purchased their homes. She argued that her snow removal policies were based on legitimate liability concerns, and that contractors should handle common area maintenance, not untrained residents. She claimed that her fall was due to the contractor's negligence, not her policies, and that she had already been victimized once by poor maintenance, and was now being victimized again by vindictive neighbors. The statement went on for 10 minutes, and by the end, several people in the room were shaking their heads or rolling their eyes. When Michelle finished reading, she looked up and said, "The floor is now open for discussion before we vote." Marcus Webb, the lawyer, stood up first. "I want to address several points in Patricia's statement. First, while the bylaws do technically prohibit residents from clearing common areas, this is a standard liability protection clause that is typically enforced with common sense. If a resident wants to help their neighbors by clearing snow early in the morning before a contractor can arrive, that should be encouraged, not punished. Patricia's rigid enforcement created the exact hazardous conditions the bylaw was meant to prevent." He continued, pulling out his own documents. "Second, I obtained the contract between the HOA and Chen Property Services. Patricia unilaterally modified the terms of service to reduce costs over the contractor's explicit objections and warnings. She prioritized saving money over safety, then blamed the contractor when her cost-cutting measures resulted in inadequate service. This is documented in multiple emails that the contractor has provided to the insurance company." Janet Ashford stood up next, her voice shaking slightly but determined. "I want to say something. When Patricia fined Vincent for helping me, I was humiliated. I had asked him for help because I could not safely get my daughter to school through the snow. My daughter has asthma. It was a medical necessity, and Patricia's response was to fine him and publicly shame him in an email to everyone. That is not leadership. That is cruelty." Mrs. Patterson spoke up from her seat, not bothering to stand. "I am 82 years old. I have lived in this community for 12 years. In all that time, I have never felt unsafe or unwelcome until Patricia took over. She has made this place feel hostile and unpleasant. I cannot walk through snow with my walker. Vincent's help was the only reason I could get to my doctor's appointments this winter. Fining him for that was unconscionable." Speaker after speaker stood up, each sharing their own experiences with Patricia's leadership. The complaints ranged from her aggressive enforcement of minor rules to her dismissive attitude toward legitimate concerns to her pattern of prioritizing money over safety and community well-being. It became clear that the snow removal issue was just the most visible symptom of a larger problem. Michelle let the discussion continue for about 45 minutes, then called for a vote. All those in favor of removing Patricia Henderson as HOA president, please raise your hand. Every hand in the room went up. All 12 units, voting unanimously for removal. All those opposed. Not a single hand rose. The motion passes unanimously. Patricia Henderson is hereby removed as president of the Meadowbrook Townhomes Homeowners Association, effective immediately. We will need to schedule a new election for president at our next regular meeting. In the interim, the vice president will assume leadership duties. The vice president, a quiet man named Thomas Green from Unit 8, looked stunned to suddenly find himself in charge. But he nodded acceptance and stood up. I think the first order of business is to revise our snow removal policy to something more sensible. I propose we authorize residents to clear walkways if they choose, while still maintaining the contractor for official removal. Any objections? There were none. The meeting adjourned shortly after, and I walked out into the cold March night feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Justice, at least in this small corner of the world, had been served, but the story was not quite over. 2 weeks after the meeting, I received a call from Sarah Patel, the insurance claims adjuster. Mr. Quinlan, I wanted to update you on the status of Mrs. Henderson's claim. The insurance company has denied her claim in full. Our investigation determined that her injuries were the direct result of policies she implemented in her capacity as HOA president. Policies that our contractor explicitly warned would create hazardous conditions. She cannot claim the HOA was negligent when she was the one making the decisions that led to the negligence. What does that mean for her? It means her medical bills and other expenses are her own responsibility. She has indicated she may file a lawsuit against the HOA, but frankly, our lawyers do not think she has a case. If anything, the HOA might have grounds to pursue action against her for the costs associated with defending against her claim. Is that going to happen? Probably not. The new HOA leadership seems inclined to just move on, but I thought you should know how it turned out, since you were so central to the investigation. I thanked her for the information and ended the call. A few days later, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia had put her townhouse up for sale. Apparently, living in a community where everyone had voted unanimously to remove you from leadership was not comfortable. I could not say I felt too sorry for her. The following winter brought vindication in the most satisfying way possible. Thomas Green proved to be an excellent HOA president, running things with common sense and actual concern for the residents' well-being. He renegotiated the contract with Robert Chen's company, restoring the early morning service and proper ice treatment. He also formally amended the bylaws to explicitly allow residents to clear walkways on common areas, adding language that thanked volunteers for their community service rather than threatening them with fines. On the first major snowfall of the next season, I was out at 5:30 in the morning with my shovel, clearing the walkway just like I had always done. This time, though, I was not alone. Derek Morrison was clearing the section near his unit, and Marcus Webb was working on the far end. We had a system going, and by 6:30, the entire walkway was clear and safe. The contractor arrived at 7, just as the first residents were heading to work, and put down salt and ice treatment on our cleared path. It was efficient, safe, and exactly how a community should function. Mrs. Patterson stopped me one morning as I was finishing up, her walker navigating easily over the cleared pavement. "Vincent, dear, I wanted to thank you again for everything you did. Not just the snow clearing, but standing up to Patricia. This place feels like home again." "You are welcome, Mrs. Patterson. I am just glad things worked out. You know what the best part is?" She had a mischievous glint in her eye. Patricia never did get any money from that insurance claim, and I heard she had to settle for selling her unit below market value because she was so desperate to leave. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. I thought about Patricia slipping on that ice, the karmic justice of falling victim to her own rigid policies. I thought about the $250 fine she had levied against me for helping Janet, and how that petty punishment had ultimately sparked her own downfall. I thought about how a simple act of shoveling snow had escalated into HOA drama, insurance investigations, and a unanimous vote of no confidence. You know what, Mrs. Patterson? I think you are right. The universe definitely has a sense of humor. She patted my arm and continued on her way, and I returned my shovel to the garage, already looking forward to the next snowfall. There was something deeply satisfying about clearing that walkway now, knowing that I was not just helping my neighbors, but also exercising a right that we had fought for and won. The story could have ended there, with Patricia gone and the community returning to normal. But life rarely wraps up quite that neatly, and there was still one more chapter to come. It was mid-February, almost exactly 1 year after Patricia's fall, when I received a certified letter. I signed for it with the mail carrier, noting the return address was from a law firm in downtown Chicago, Holloway, Mitchell & Barnes, LLP. My stomach sank as I opened it, expecting some kind of lawsuit from Patricia. The letter inside was not what I expected. It was from a lawyer named Elizabeth Holloway, and it requested my presence as a witness in a lawsuit. But Patricia was not suing the HOA. She was being sued by someone else entirely. I called the number listed on the letterhead and was connected to Miss Holloway's office. After a brief hold, a professional voice came on the line. "Mr. Quinlan, thank you for calling. I represent Robert Chen and Chen Property Services in a lawsuit against Patricia Henderson for defamation and tortious interference with business relations." "I am sorry, what, miss?" Holloway explained patiently. After her insurance claim was denied, Mrs. Henderson began posting negative reviews of Mr. Chen's company online, on multiple platforms. She accused him of negligence, incompetence, and endangering residents. These reviews are demonstrably false and have cost Mr. Chen several contracts. We have filed suit and are seeking damages. Your testimony about the actual circumstances of her fall and Mr. Chen's contract modifications would be very helpful to our case. I agreed to testify, and 6 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a conference room in a downtown Chicago office building for a deposition. Patricia was there with her own lawyer, a harried-looking man who seemed to know his client did not have a strong case. Patricia looked older than I remembered, her face pinched and angry as I was sworn in. The deposition lasted 3 hours. "Miss." Holloway walked me through the entire timeline. Patricia's modification of the snow removal contract, her enforcement of the bylaws against resident volunteers, Robert Chen's documented warnings, the conditions on the day of her fall, and the insurance investigation that followed. I answered every question truthfully, providing copies of emails and documentation when requested. Patricia's lawyer tried to poke holes in my testimony, suggesting I was biased because Patricia had fined me. I acknowledged the fine but pointed out that my testimony was supported by documentary evidence, not just my opinion. He asked if I had any personal animosity toward Patricia. I said I had been frustrated by her policies, but had no desire to see her harmed, which was true. I had warned her about the ice, after all. When the deposition concluded, Miss Holloway thanked me and said she would be in touch about trial dates. As I was leaving, I passed Patricia in the hallway. She looked at me with pure venom. "This is all your fault," she hissed. If you had just followed the rules, none of this would have happened. I stopped and turned to face her fully. Patricia, I did follow the rules. I stopped shoveling when you told me to. You fell because of your own decisions. Nobody forced you to cut the contractor's hours. Nobody forced you to refuse ice treatment. And nobody forced you to post false reviews about a man who was just trying to do his job under the restrictions you imposed. You did this to yourself. I walked away without waiting for a response. Whatever Patricia's issues were, they were not my problem anymore. The lawsuit settled 2 months later. I heard the details from Robert Chen himself, who stopped by my townhouse to thank me for testifying. Patricia had agreed to pay $30,000 in damages, remove all negative reviews, and post corrections acknowledging that her accusations were false. She was also required to write letters of apology to the property management companies she had contacted to warn them against hiring Chen Property Services. $30,000 is not going to make me whole, Robert admitted. I probably lost twice that in contracts. But the public corrections are what matter. My reputation is restored, and everyone in the industry knows what really happened now. I appreciate you telling the truth, Vincent. Not everyone would have gotten involved. You were protecting your business. That was fair. And honestly, after everything that happened, I think a lot of people in our community wanted to see Patricia held accountable. Robert nodded. I heard she moved out of state, somewhere in Arizona, I think. Good riddance, I said, and I meant it. The next winter was blissfully drama-free. Thomas Green continued as HOA president, running things smoothly and efficiently. The snow removal arrangement worked perfectly, with residents doing early clearing and the contractor providing professional service on a reasonable schedule. There were no falls, no injuries, and no complaints. I continued my routine of clearing the walkway on snowy mornings, joined by several neighbors who had adopted the same habit. It became a point of community pride, this small act of taking care of each other. Sometimes Mrs. Patterson would bring out thermoses of hot coffee for those of us working in the cold. Janet Ashford's daughter Emma started helping too, using a small plastic shovel to clear the snow from around the mailboxes, her mother watching proudly. One morning in January, Derek Morrison and I were working on opposite ends of the walkway when we met in the middle. He leaned on his shovel and shook his head. You know, I have been thinking about that whole situation with Patricia. The thing that gets me is how it could have all been avoided if she had just listened. If she had just used common sense instead of treating the bylaws like sacred scripture. People like Patricia do not think that way, I said. They see rules as a source of power, not as guidelines for creating a good community. She wanted control more than she wanted people to be safe or happy. And she ended up losing everything because of it. Her position, her reputation, $30,000, and she had to move away in shame. All over snow shoveling. Not just snow shoveling, I corrected. It was about respect and safety and treating people decently. The snow was just where those issues became visible. Derek considered that, then nodded. You are right, and I guess that is the lesson, isn't it? You can hide behind rules and regulations all you want, but eventually, reality catches up with you. Sometimes literally when you slip on ice. We both laughed at that, dark humor perhaps, but earned after everything we had been through. We finished clearing the walkway together, and I headed inside to get ready for work, satisfied with a job well done. The experience changed me in ways I had not expected. I became more involved with the HOA, attending meetings regularly and volunteering for the Architectural Review Committee. I wanted to make sure we never ended up with another Patricia, someone who saw the HOA as a personal fiefdom rather than a service organization. Thomas Green welcomed my involvement, and I like to think I helped keep things running smoothly. I also became more aware of the importance of community and looking out for one another. The pandemic had isolated so many people, and even after things returned to relative normalcy, there was a tendency for everyone to retreat into their own little bubbles. The snow shoveling routine became a way to break down those barriers, a regular reminder that we were all in this together. Janet Ashford and I became good friends through it all. She would invite me over for dinner sometimes, and I would help her with odd jobs around her unit. Emma started calling me Uncle Vincent, which melted my heart every time. It was nice to have that connection, that sense of being part of something larger than just my own life. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 winters later, just after her 85th birthday. The entire community attended her funeral, and I was honored to be asked to speak. I talked about her kindness, her determination, and how she had been one of the first to stand up against Patricia's unfair policies. I mentioned how she had circulated the petition with her walker, going door to door to make sure everyone had a voice. The image of this tiny, elderly woman fighting for what was right had stayed with me, and I wanted everyone to remember her that way. Her husband died 3 months later, and everyone said it was a broken heart. Their unit was sold to a young couple with a new baby, and the cycle of community continued. As for Patricia, I heard occasional updates through various channels. She had apparently tried to get involved with her new HOA in Arizona, and had been quickly shut down when they looked into her history. Word travels fast in property management circles, and her lawsuit settlements and removal from leadership were a matter of public record. She eventually gave up and resigned herself to just being a regular resident, which was probably the best outcome for everyone. The irony was never lost on me that Patricia's downfall had started with her trying to find me for helping my neighbors. That $250 fine, which she had announced so triumphantly in her community-wide email, had been the catalyst for everything that followed. It had opened everyone's eyes to her leadership style and started the chain of events that led to her removal, her failed insurance claim, her lawsuit losses, and ultimately her exile from the community. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had just paid the fine quietly and stopped shoveling without making an issue of it. Would Patricia have continued ruling the HOA with an iron fist? Would someone else have eventually stood up to her, or would everyone have just accepted her authoritarianism as the price of community living? I would never know for sure, but I was glad things had worked out the way they did. The story became something of a legend in our townhouse community, and even spread to neighboring HOAs. I was occasionally recognized at local business meetings or community events, pointed out as that guy who fought the HOA over snow shoveling. It was embarrassing at first, but I came to accept it. If my experience could encourage other people to stand up against unfair rules or petty tyrants in positions of power, then the whole ordeal had been worthwhile. Marcus Webb, the lawyer who had spoken so eloquently at the special meeting, told me once that our situation was textbook HOA overreach, and that he was considering writing a law journal article about it. He said it perfectly illustrated the tension between legitimate governance and petty authoritarianism, and how homeowner associations could either enhance community life or destroy it depending on who was in charge. I gave him permission to use my story, and the article was eventually published in the Illinois Bar Journal. My mother was so proud she bought 10 copies. The financial aftermath for Patricia must have been devastating, though I never learned the full extent of her losses. Beyond the $30,000 settlement to Robert Chen, She had legal fees from defending against the HOA's insurance investigation, legal fees from her own failed insurance claim, and legal fees from the defamation lawsuit. Add in the loss she took selling her townhouse quickly and below market value, and she had probably lost over $100,000 total, all because she could not let residents shovel snow. There was a part of me that felt sympathy for her, despite everything. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to become a petty tyrant. Patricia had probably taken the HOA president role with good intentions, genuinely believing she was protecting the community from liability and ensuring proper standards. But somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of the purpose behind the rules. She had become so focused on enforcement that she forgot about the people she was supposed to be serving. It was a lesson I tried to keep in mind whenever I dealt with rules or regulations in any context, whether at work or in the community or just in daily life. Rules existed to serve people, not the other way around. The moment you prioritized the rule over the person, you had already lost your way. On the 5-year anniversary of Patricia's fall, which I remembered because it was a few days before my birthday, we got another major snowstorm. I was out at my usual early morning time, clearing the walkway with my now well-worn shovel. The sky was just starting to lighten, painting everything in shades of gray and blue. My breath made clouds in the frigid air, and my muscles burned pleasantly from the exertion. As I worked, I thought about everything that had happened since that morning when Patricia had confronted me with her phone and her bylaws and her threats of fines. I thought about how such a small thing, such a mundane neighborhood dispute, had escalated into something that changed my life and my community in fundamental ways. I thought about the friendships I had made, the leadership skills I had developed, and the satisfaction of knowing I had done the right thing even when it was difficult. Derek emerged from his unit and waved at me, grabbing his own shovel to work on his section. Janet came out a few minutes later, Emma bundled up beside her, ready to help with her little plastic shovel. Thomas Green appeared with a bag of ice melt, spreading it carefully along the path we were clearing. It had become our routine, our community ritual, our small way of taking care of each other. The contractor truck pulled up right at 7, and Robert Chen himself got out. He had started doing our community personally again, saying he liked the relationship we had built and appreciated working with an HOA that actually understood what contractors needed to do their jobs properly. He joined us in the clearing, and we worked together until the entire walkway was spotless and safe. When we finished, we all stood together in the cold morning air, admiring our handiwork. The sun had fully risen now, illuminating the pristine walkway cutting through the snow-covered landscape. It was beautiful in its simplicity, this cleared path that represented so much more than just removed snow. It represented community and cooperation and common sense prevailing over petty authority. "You know," Thomas said, "I think about Patricia sometimes. About how differently things could have gone if she had just been reasonable." "Me too," I admitted. "But I also think everything happened the way it needed to. Sometimes you need conflict to clarify what really matters. That whole situation taught us what kind of community we wanted to be." "A community that actually cares about people," Janet added. "Not just rules." "A community where neighbors help each other," Derek said, "even if it means breaking a stupid rule." We all agreed with that sentiment and slowly dispersed to get ready for our days. I returned my shovel to the garage and went inside, tracking snow across my entryway despite my best efforts. I made coffee and toast, standing at my kitchen window and looking out at the cleared walkway, feeling content in a way that was hard to describe. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. The HOA was planning a community barbecue for the first warm weekend in spring, and he wanted to know if I would help organize it. I texted back my agreement, already thinking about who I should recruit to help and what food we should serve. These small acts of community building mattered, perhaps now more than ever. Later that day at work, during a break between patients, I found myself telling the story to a new nurse who had just started in our department. She listened with wide eyes as I described the whole saga, from Patricia's initial fine to her fall to the lawsuit to her eventual departure. When I finished, she shook her head in amazement. "That is wild," she said. "I mean, I have heard HOA horror stories, but that one takes the cake. Do you ever regret getting involved? Seems like it was a lot of stress." I thought about her question carefully. "No," I finally said. "I do not regret it at all. It was stressful, sure, but it was also necessary. And honestly, it brought our community together in a way that never would have happened otherwise. Sometimes you have to go through conflict to build something better on the other side." She nodded thoughtfully. "I guess that makes sense. I just hope I never have to deal with an HOA like that." "If you do," I told her, "just remember that the people matter more than the rules. Keep that in mind and you will be fine." It was advice I had learned the hard way, but it had proven true time and time again. The rules were supposed to serve the community, not control it. The moment any organization lost sight of that principle, it began to fail its fundamental purpose. That evening, I attended the monthly HOA meeting, which had become a much more pleasant affair under Thomas's leadership. We reviewed the budget, discussed some upcoming maintenance projects, and voted on a proposal to add better lighting along the walkways. Everything was conducted efficiently and with actual concern for what residents needed and wanted. It was night and day compared to Patricia's tenure. After the meeting, several of us went out for drinks at a local bar in downtown Naperville. It had become an informal tradition, a way to socialize beyond just HOA business. We laughed and told stories and complained about work and talked about plans for the summer. It was normal, pleasant, and exactly what community relationships should be. As I drove home that night, passing through the quiet streets of our suburban Illinois town, I reflected on how much my life had changed in 5 years. I had friends I never would have made, experiences I never would have had, and a sense of belonging I never would have felt if I had just quietly accepted Patricia's fine and stopped shoveling the walkway. Standing up to her had been risky. It could have made me a pariah in the community. It could have resulted in more fines or harassment. It could have failed completely, leaving Patricia in power and me as just another disgruntled resident. But it had not worked out that way. Instead, it had sparked a movement that resulted in positive change for everyone. The key, I had realized over time, was that I had not been alone. Other residents had been just as frustrated as I was. They had been waiting for someone to speak up, to articulate what they were all feeling. Once I took that first stand, they had rallied behind me. That collective action had been what made the difference. It was a lesson applicable far beyond HOA politics. In any situation where authority was being abused or rules were being enforced unreasonably, individuals needed to speak up. But more importantly, communities needed to support those individuals, to stand together against unfairness. Solidarity was the antidote to petty tyranny. I pulled into my parking space and walked carefully along the cleared walkway to my front door, my footsteps crunching on the rock salt Robert had spread. The exterior light illuminated the small welcome Matt Janet had given me as a thank you gift years ago. It said, "Home is where the heart is," and I smiled every time I saw it. Inside, my townhouse was warm and comfortable. I had gradually made it my own over the years, adding personal touches and improvements. Photos of friends and family decorated the walls. Books filled the shelves. It felt like home in a way it had not when I first moved in, and I knew a large part of that was because of the community I had helped build around me. Before bed, I checked my email one last time and found a message from the new residents in the Pattersons' old unit. They were asking for advice about baby-proofing their townhouse and wondering if I knew any good contractors. I sent back a detailed response with recommendations, including Robert Chen's company, for any outdoor work they might need. These small acts of helping and connecting were what made a community function. They were worth fighting for, worth standing up for, worth the stress and conflict when necessary. Patricia had tried to rule through fear and fines and rigid enforcement of rules. But in the end, community was built on kindness and cooperation and common sense. Those values had won, and they would continue to win as long as people were willing to defend them. I fell asleep that night feeling grateful for my home, my neighbors, and the unexpected journey that had brought us all together. The story that had started with a dispute about snow shoveling had become something much larger, a testament to the power of ordinary people standing up for what was right. And if nothing else ever came from the whole experience, that would be enough.